being relentless means I'm going to do the hard thing when other people give up. Everything I teach is so much about rejection because that's what holds people back. I say, are you going to die? No, you can't die of embarrassment. That is not a medical diagnosis. I trusted him so completely that we stopped paying attention. My CFO finally took me aside and he said, you need to come in and take a harder look at stuff. I grew up as a painful introvert, and it really frustrated me. And I realized I wasn't getting where I wanted to go in life. And I would see bold people and I would say, why are they like this?
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, let's get it started. This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm your host for today. And in our studio, we have Fred Joyal. How are you today, sir?
You know, I'm on a roll today. I'm getting a lot done, and we've been teeing this up for a while, so I'm really excited to have this conversation.
This is a really cool conversation. I grew up, I remember like when you came on, I remember the commercials from your company, and I'm excited to talk about that. So
You're
this is going to
older
be a
than
good
you
one.
look, Rick, at that point. So, yeah.
Well, folks, before we get started, if you haven't done it already, I would be extremely grateful if you like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get updates every time we drop a new episode. And without further ado, let's get to it. So, sir, the first question I ask folks is, who are you? What do you do? And why do you do what you do? So if you wouldn't mind, get into that for us.
Give the rundown. So my name's Fred Joyal. I am a longtime entrepreneur, an author of 3 books at this point, and a keynote speaker and a business advisor, and wading back into the entrepreneurial life once again. I'm magnetically pulled to creating businesses and building them. So I started a company called 1-800-Dentist many years ago. I am not a dentist. I am an ad man. I grew up in the ad agency world and then started my own business based on advertising. Ran that for 28 years and sold it in decline. Google basically ate the business, and the damage they didn't do, private equity finished it off, you know. But like any business, there's all these twists and turns, but it was a phenomenal success, you know, the largest dentist referral service in the country for many, many years. A great culture, terrific people, and wrote a couple of books on dental practice marketing for it. And now I've written a book on developing boldness as a life skill. And that is my passion, to help people to live bolder, more satisfying lives and chase their dreams without inhibiting themselves. So that's me
I
in a
love that.
nutshell.
In a nutshell, So we obviously can't start any place but Superbold. Let's talk about that. Where does that passion come from? What is that about?
I grew up as a painful introvert. I mean, I could literally go to a party and meet no one. And I hesitated to meet girls and to try things and take risks. And I was always worried about being judged or embarrassed or failing. And it really frustrated me. And I realized I wasn't getting where I wanted to go in life. And I would see bold people and I would say, why are they like this? I mean, why don't they process rejection like I do? Why aren't they embarrassed about some of these things they're doing? They're out there and people are drawn to them and they're getting to stuff. So I just realized I had to emulate them, as uncomfortable as that made me. And what happened is I started being rewarded for it, and in unexpected ways, and life just got better and better, and which was important because that boldness paid off in the advertising world and then in the entrepreneurial world. And what it led to was me being in front of about 500 high school students and giving them my life lessons at the time. And one of the lessons was boldness is a superpower.
Mm.
And so I said, and the younger you develop it, the more satisfying and enjoyable and exciting your life will be. So they came up to me, a whole group of them after, and went, that sounds great. How?
Yeah.
That's the
And I
question.
realized I had to figure out how I did it and figure out a way that somebody else can do it much faster. So that evolved into a lecture series and then eventually the book, Superbold. And that with the subhead is From Underconfident to Charismatic 90 Days, which is a bold promise, but it would be kind of embarrassing if it weren't. And so it's about doing stuff. It's not just, oh, read the book and everything change. It's like read the book to understand what you have to do to become bolder and bolder and bolder and the difference that will make in your life. So
Mm, mm,
that's where I'm at now. I created a video course primarily focused on helping salespeople right now,
yeah.
and I'll probably do one for individuals. But I do keynote speaking on it to any audience. I love talking, obviously, to high school kids and college students,
Hmm.
and then businesses. I love it when it's the whole business. They bring the whole team in. I did one last year, and they said, we're going to make this our theme for 2026 is boldness, because the whole company, every department was there, and they got on excited to get on board with that idea of like, let's all be bolder. And they develop a language that they use with each other. They go like, they just call each other out and they say, why are you uncomfortable here? Why are you hesitating? Is this something you really want? Why are we afraid of trying this? Why do we think we have to be perfect before we try this? Or, why do we have to eliminate all risk, which is impossible?
Mm,
Why don't we, how do we try this and protect ourselves from complete disaster? But, and then what did we learn instead of, like, the example I use is my partner and I, when we created 800 Dentists, he had his strengths and I had my strengths and we had our weaknesses. And so we always acquiesced to the other guy's strengths whenever it was a decision. But
yeah.
once we made the decision, if it went wrong, there was no, hey, this was your idea. It was
Yeah.
like we decided together and, you know, let's learn from it.
Yeah.
You get 20 minutes to grieve it. It's like, wow, we lost 50 grand. That stung. But that was dumb. How did we manage to do that? And then you just start to say, okay, now what do we learn? How do we fix it? How do we get smarter?
Mm, mm. I love that after work. What do we
Yeah.
learn? How do we get smarter? How do we get better? I love that. I love that. One of the a number of members of our audience and folks that I work with, always have that we'll call it a little bit of angst, around, not selling in and of itself, because, you start, the conversation starts and it's kind of easy to say, hey, this is what I do, or, however that story comes about. But it's that initial step, whether it's picking up the phone or walking up to somebody in a networking group, or, doing an intro in Zoom. What do you say to folks? How do they move from that cautious, I don't want to sell state, to just getting out there every day and kind of loving it and crushing it?
It's a gradual transition from worrying about what other people think and processing rejection as something negative. Now, I'll tell
Mm,
you, one of the themes of everything I teach is so much about rejection, because that's what holds people back. That's what makes them hesitate. Is a fear of embarrassment, a fear of rejection, fear of failure. And I say, are you going to die? No. You can't die of embarrassment. That is not a medical diagnosis. Okay. That is a term, that is a figure of speech. But
mm,
here's the amazing thing: being embarrassed is a choice, feeling rejected is a choice. It is not, oh, that's what happened to me. No, they rejected me. It's like, no, you translated it into rejecting. They may have just been busy or having a terrible day or in a different mindset. Oh, they don't need your stuff and they don't have any time to talk. It's that
mm,
they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting what you presented to them. It's, the analogy I use is in stand-up comedy, you can be funny and have bad jokes.
mhm,
You will have bad jokes. You will have
mhm,
stuff that people don't laugh at. It doesn't mean you suck. It
mhm,
means the joke sucked. And you want to, if you can separate that as you go out there and say, look, I know, especially in sales, I know I have to aggregate rejection to get success. It's a funnel. It's not a tunnel. There's the top of the funnel is never the same size as the bottom. That's just the way it is. So you go like, I got to put as much stuff in the top of the funnel as possible and widen every other level as much as possible as
Mm.
whenever that's my responsibility. Most of the time it's marketing's responsibility to put stuff in the top of the funnel. And then it's the
I'd love a marketing did
salespeople.
that every time.
Yeah. 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 And you can blame the leads or you can work the leads
Yeah.
or you can prospect or you can follow up. All of these things, follow up is an amazing thing because people hesitate to do it because they have a limiting mindset about it. They say, oh, these people already turned me down.
Yeah.
Fear of rejection already,
Yeah.
right? But here's the data. 80% of sales close in the second to fifth follow-up.
Second to fifth follow-up. Okay.
80%. So that's how much money you're leaving on the table with that limiting belief. When they weren't ready to buy yet. You didn't do enough. The timing wasn't right. Their
Mhm.
need wasn't right. They needed to understand one more thing. They needed a little more money, whatever it is.
Mhm.
It takes boldness to follow up. So it starts with an understanding. And then it says, I have to be willing to be uncomfortable to get better.
Mm.
And so the analogy is like when you're in the gym, your goal when you're doing curls or bench presses or pull-ups, we have a very interesting goal when we exercise. Failure.
Mhm.
We are doing it till we can't do it. As a
Mhm.
reason to do the last one is like, I'm going till I can't do it because the 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 biological data is the last 2 reps are where 80% of the growth happens.
Yeah.
So if you go easy on yourself, you don't get 80% of the growth. So you do the exercise deliberately being uncomfortable because in the discomfort is the positive consequence. There is no negative consequence to failure in exercise.
Mhm.
How do you translate that? You take it and you say, I'm going to do bold things when there are no consequences. I'm going to talk to strangers. I'm going to talk to people in an elevator. I'm going to do something ridiculous that people would say is embarrassing. I recently broke my toe, for example, and there were no shoes that I could get on except somebody had given me these Grinch slippers at Christmas time. So I wore them for 3 days and
Mhm.
went everywhere. All I did was delight people. Because they'd look and they go like, your shoes are making me so happy right now. And so many people would go like, oh, I can't go outside like this. I'll look ridiculous. It's like, guess what? There was no downside. There was actually a huge upside.
Yeah.
I was lightening up somebody's day with my silliness.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea is to build your boldness muscle by doing bold things when the negative consequences are insignificant. And
Mhm.
what happens is that transfers over. Just like exercise, the positive results of exercise aren't just that you can lift heavy objects,
Mhm.
is that your blood is flowing, your brain is working better, your energy is better, your body craves better food. Like the
Mhm.
positives stack up that aren't linear. And it's the same thing with developing your boldness and building your boldness muscle. Is now you say, yeah, I don't feel like picking up the phone right now because they're probably going to hang up on me. So I better pick up the phone right now. Makes it really, you just go like, I got to get the first one out. You approach it with no real agenda.
Mhm.
I'm going to dial this phone and I got to get a lead. I got to get a call. I got to get it closed. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to dial the phone and I'm going to have a conversation with somebody on the phone and find out if there's anything that I can help them with.
So you're going at it with a goal instead of an expectation.
Yeah. What do I have to give? And believe me, there are people who are selling stuff they should not be selling. And you
Yeah.
need to quit that job, because but there's plenty of stuff that people need to be talked into, whether it's life insurance or, upgrading their home so their family has space and
Mhm.
whatever it is, the people need that they need to be talked into.
Mm.
And so if you've got that, like, I've got a better software for you, it's going to give you back some time, and you're going to have accurate numbers. You're going to know your KPIs, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah,
You got something like that. Yeah, there's a million business owners that need that.
yeah.
And so if you come from a place of no agenda and generosity, like like when I meet somebody, I have no agenda. If somebody says, "What do you do?" I say, "Well, I teach people boldness, but tell me more about what you do." I don't
Mhm.
give them a pitch. My agenda is find out who they are, what matters to them, what's important. And as a side effect, they're going to be curious about what I'm doing, and they might not be. And that's okay. Some people don't
That's
know how to
okay,
be
yeah.
curious. Some people are not curious. And they may not be in that space to find out. Let's find that out right away. I'm not really interested in surrounding myself with people who have no curiosity.
Mhm.
And if they're not curious about my product or what I offer, then they don't need it,
Yeah.
or they're not ready for it, or, or they may need to hear it 5 times. They may, the other example I use is when I first heard Tony Robbins. Now, I've been around a long time, and Tony Robbins was starting almost at the same time I started Agent of Dentist. And I went, I'm not interested in this guy at all.
Mhm.
So 20 years later, I finally hear something. I hear him say something, and it was, the day you take responsibility for everything in your own life is the day your life actually starts. And I went, well, I wish I understood that 20 years ago. And I realized Tony's got some value for me, and my judgment of him impaired me,
Yeah,
prevented me from extracting the value he had because I had judgments about him. Why? Because he was so bold.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I wanted to be bold. So my only way, and I couldn't figure out how to get there. So my only way was to have judgment about bold people.
When you were as you were building your company, I mean, you took your company from what, 30,000 up to what, 1.2 billion, I think it was?
Well, so yeah, so when we throw the billion around, it's because that's when, if you add up all the money I generated in the 28 years, it's a billion two that I
Okay,
generated in revenue. We peaked out just short of 50 million a year, but we did it with $30,000 of family money.
pretty sweet.
We didn't take on any partners or any money until we were something like 10 years in, and people were like, "We want to get in. Can we get in?" And
Give me
and it
money.
started with a guy who he wanted to come work as and be president of the company, and my partner was ready to step down, and so he bought in for 2 million bucks just to get the job, and we're
Nice.
like, we needed more employees like that, but
I need employees like that. So a question was gonna be, in that, I mean, that's, quite a venture. What were some times when you needed to absolutely be bold? You didn't know what was gonna happen, and you just had to put yourself out there.
there were times when I was, there were so many times, but there was at one point we had a, was there was a, when you run a business since 1986, you've got 9/11 happening in 2001, which changed all sorts of things. You've got the internet crisis. You've got the adjustable mortgage crisis in 2007. All of these things, and then recessions and inflation and all these cycles going on. So bad stuff happens. And at one point, we were so cash constrained that if we didn't pay our media bill like the next day, that we owed like an extra 100,000, and all of our credit card money that was supposed to come in wasn't going to come in till the Monday, and it was Thursday. I needed the money on Friday because it
Hmm.
was the end of the month. And if I lost my media credit, I went from 60 days of accounts payable to 15 days in advance. So I would go 75 days in the wrong direction with millions of dollars of media that I need. And I just needed 100 grand. And so I just like was out there, and in the world of bizarre things, when you just say, I need a solution, I'm just going to keep looking everywhere. I'm having coffee with a friend of mine who couldn't lend me the money, but was helping me strategize it, because it started,
Mhm.
I had coffee with him to see if he could do a swing loan. An ex-girlfriend of mine drives by. We're sitting outside this coffee, backs up, yells out the window at me. I go up. She's got 2 kids in the back of the car and stuff. And I chat with her for a minute or two, and then she drives away. And then I sit down with my friend and I say, her husband could lend me 100 grand, because he's either got a pile of cash or he's got it all pushed out. He was in commercial real estate. So he either was
Mhm.
putting all his money out or accumulating it again for the next wave. So I just called him and I said, Tracy, would you like to make $5,000 in 2 weeks on 100 grand? And I said, I need a loan and I'll pay you back in 2 weeks and I'll give you 5 grand in interest on it. And he said, I can do that. And I said, all right, well, I need to get back to the office and I'll get a contract and I'll send it to your CFO. He goes, no, just give me the wiring instruction. Wired it in that day.
Amazing. Amazing. That was
And
bold.
it's bold enough to ask, bold enough to have relationships like that, where you can, because a lot of people in business would go like, well, I can't admit to my friends that I need something, or that I'm in a tight spot. They think I'm so successful. I have to create that illusion. So it was things like that, and it was also, it's like, w- w- we started 800 Dentist with radio advertising because it was cheap. You could produce a radio spot for $1,000, and we wanted to be on TV, but we couldn't afford to create TV spots. But eventually we said, we have to try this. Somehow we have to get on TV. But I said, and this is one of the random things. I end up on a plane flight sitting next to somebody that I used to work with in an ad agency.
Mhm.
And I said, "What do you do now?" And she says, "Well, I'm an agent for directors and cinematographers." And I said, "That's interesting, because what I'm looking for is a couple of college graduates who came out of film school who are willing to do spots dirt cheap or for practically nothing, because they need a reel. They need to show that they can produce these." And she says, "I have the 2 guys you're looking for." And so they made a TV spot for me. Now, back then, this was a lot relatively cheap, because the average TV spot back then was 50 grand. They made 3 spots for 20 grand. One of them was a total home run. We ran it constantly for a year. We tripled the business, 300% growth by going on television. And it
Amazing.
was just
Amazing.
like, we got to make the bet. We got to take the quantum leap out of the safety of radio and the inexpensive production, and into media buying that we don't really know as well. Buying radio is a very different game than buying television time. And everybody's selling you the worst times they can, in both of those places. And so it was things like that made all of the difference, because, and we did things colossally wrong that we just learned from. And, it's like I tell people, the key to growing your business is to make survivable mistakes, because that's the way it works. Is you're not going to be right. If you're right 70% of the time, you'll be a millionaire. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that. I have that 80% rule, if I've got 80% of the information, I'm ready to go. It's go time.
pull the
Let's build
trigger.
this mini.
Right. Yeah. No.
One of the other things that crosses my mind, I mean, had the business for, such a long time. I know it takes people, to run a great company. So what were some of the things that you did that made sure that you had great people and they were on board and you're continuing to grow?
So we had, long before people had core values, my partner and I had three operative principles, is what we called them then. One is we wanted a place where we wanted to go every day. We wanted to create that environment because we had
Mhm.
had crappy jobs and crappy bosses and crappy products to sell. And we didn't want that for ourselves. We didn't want to be that or have that around us.
Yeah.
And everybody the whole thing had to be win-win. The customer had to win, the dentist had to win, our employees had to win, and we had to win. And whatever part of that or whatever endeavor included in that, it had to pass those four things, or we simply wouldn't do it. And step three was it's got to make money. And money was always third. And what happens is money a lot of times works its way up to the top and you go like, I can pay people less. I can take away some of their benefits. Or like these banks that the board votes to lay 10,000 people off in December so they can all take a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they lay 10,000 people off at Christmas time. And not a single one of these guys needs a nickel,
Yeah.
but they're bonusing themselves. We were never those guys. We had a great place to wear, and because of that, we retained people. My last month at work after 28 years, we celebrated three 25-year employees.
Wow.
Those people had given me their entire adult lives.
Wow.
That's the
Wow.
kind of environment we created. We took care of people. We had a live call center, but we made sure the life was streaming into the place. And there was music playing, there was always coffee, there was pizza day every month and and what we found, this was the thing, is sometimes you do what you wanna do for yourself, which was a
Mhm.
great place to work. As it turned out, that was a pillar of the business because what these people projected over the phone was important, all these phone operators, because the people calling were calling about dentistry. They
Yeah.
were anxious, they were apprehensive, they might have been in pain, a good percent of them were, or they
Yeah.
were just anxious about picking a dentist. That environment changed the conversion level of the calls because we became the first impression of that dental practice. So many, many more people showed up to that dentist because of the empathetic voice that they had on the phone that said, I'm going to find you a really great dentist. Because people would say, number one thing people would say, we would ask them, how long has it been since you've been to the dentist? And they say, the number one answer, you don't want to know. Because they were embarrassed that it was 5 years, 6 years sometimes. And we say, what matters is you called today. It's just, that's a whole different message. There's no guilt trip. It's like, this, you did the right thing. We're taking care of it now. And we're going to find you somebody great. You're going to want to go to them for as long as you live.
What other kinds of things did you bake into your customer experience to make them, not just one-time customers, but repeat customers and, people are referring other people back to 1-800 Dentist?
We spent a ton of money on customer service. They could always get somebody on the phone, a human on the phone to help them. Like they say, like, I don't know what's happening. I got like 20 referrals and only got three of them to show up. And you say, well, let's listen to the recordings because we have the recordings of the calls. When we transfer them over, we keep recording even after we hang up. And we listen and we go like, you know what? Maria's started to say this all of a sudden. She's like trying to find out if they got money before they even make an appointment.
Yeah.
So we developed training for their front desk people because it's a very untrained position. And it's like the aorta of the practice, right? And a
Right.
lot of these guys would have their aorta clamped off with the wrong person. And so we would help them. And if like they didn't get results, we adjusted an average of $150,000 a month in fees to people. Just because it's like, like, look, we can see you were supposed to get 12 calls, you got six, and it's the second month in a row. We're going to fix it. And that's, it's like people don't expect you to be perfect. They expect you to do something when you're not. I mean, that's the way I am. I know people go wrong, but it's like, go overboard to fix it.
Yeah.
That's the
Love that.
easiest solution in customer service is don't explain to them why they're wrong because they're not interested in finding that out. Help
Right.
them and go overboard to fix it. And I
I
tell
love it.
dentists that too. If you got an unhappy patient, it's so much cheaper for your reputation to fix it
Yeah.
because you'll turn them into somebody who recommends the practice rather than somebody who goes on Yelp or somewhere and Google and writes a bad review because that
Oh
stuff
yeah.
lives forever now, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What would you say might have been like an obstacle to growth, and how did you overcome that?
The the unpredictability of how the marketplace would respond from one city to the next because we started in LA and we moved around the country.
Hmm.
And so we would go into these cities and it would cost more to get response. And then we would go into another city and it would cost nothing, like rough numbers. To get a phone call in Los Angeles would cost me $50.
Hmm.
In Vegas, it was 5 in advertising dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when we'd start a new market, some markets we'd get traction in 3 months. Sometimes it's 4. Chicago was a year. We lost $1 million in advertising in Chicago in that first year.
Hmm.
But then 5 years in, Chicago was the most profitable market in the country, dollar-wise. It made more profit than New York or Los Angeles, and it's the 3rd largest city, but once we just had to pay our dues up front. They had that Midwestern mentality of like, I don't know this newfangled thing. I'm not interested in it, you know? And then, but they saw that we were around for a year. They started to trust us.
So you run into this problem with market penetrations having a variable cost getting into it. What was your method of getting to a place where you're more, I mean, really, bolder, going into these new cities? I mean, you talk about, losing $1 million a year in Chicago, but that's not your final destination, and you're continuing to roll out. So what did you guys do?
You say the lesson that I learned as an entrepreneur was that in order to succeed, you have to be the person who doesn't give up. You don't necessarily throw money at the problem, but you throw your brains at it. And you say, so we were with Chicago, we were saying, all right, we got to switch stations. We got to track this. We got to track you. We just up the ante of attention, not just money, because we weren't going to just keep doing the same thing, hoping for a better result.
Mhm.
We had to say, what's different? How do we change our messaging? What are they responding to here that is different than Vegas and Miami and LA?
Mm.
And that was it. That was the other thing. There was very different and one of the things that we had discovered is we had picked up a small call center in Florida because we
Mhm.
bought a small referral service there. And they had all these operators. Well, they all had a southern accent. And we wanted them to answer calls for the whole country. Well, people in the Northeast have a bias against people with a southern accent. It's totally inaccurate, but
Mhm.
you can pretend bias isn't right, and therefore you're going to just swim against the tide. Or you could say we have to have people that their English is all the same.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, just as a side note, is first of our call center were African American women. And the only way we hired anybody was they started with a phone interview because they had to leave a message and we had to hear how they spoke.
Mhm.
And so these, and it was almost all women, but like 70% women. And they would be on the phone and they would just be speaking nice, perfectly, uh, college level English to the patient, really nice. Hang up, turn and talk to one of their mates and go right into street dialogue. And it's like, wow, they flip back and forth like it's nothing, and it was but it was that sort of thing where you're always in learning mode, and you show up every day and solve problems. And all your problems are going to come from people. And
Yeah.
so, and all of your success is going to come from solving problems. Because if it were
Yeah.
easy, everybody would be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What was a really difficult situation that you had to make a difficult decision?
More than once I had to I was always trying to get out of the CEO position. So I kept growing people from inside the company.
Uh,
And twice I had to, that person had gotten beyond the level that they were going to be great at what they do. And
yeah.
some of them were pretty bad at it, surprisingly. And I had to let them go.
Mm,
But that was difficult. But there was a lesson in that with one of the CEOs is I trusted him so completely, my partner and I, that we stopped paying attention. And then my CFO finally took me aside and he said, "You need to come in and take a harder look at stuff." And that was the lesson for me, is like, you can never take your eyes off the money.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
I mean, you can work one day a month, but that one day is looking at the money, because you have to understand it, because you're the owner. Nobody cares like you do. And the biggest mistake we made, and I tell people this as my advice all the time, is we treated people really well, but we were not clear about what we expected in return.
Mm, mm. Okay.
You
Tell me
have to
more.
make so you say, "This is a great place to work, and I want you to bust ass while you're here. I want you to give me a full day's work every day and be accountable for that." And we kept people longer than we should have, like almost everybody.
Yeah.
But we got better at letting people go, and eventually, way too late, got better at saying, "This is a great place to work. The way you get to stay here is you get better every year at what you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And if you can't figure out how to get better, you need to ask somebody." And because we'll either move you to a different, we had a 3R rule with employees. You either retrain them, repurpose them, or replace them. And
Yeah.
so, because some people, just like a salesperson is the classic example, they'll drift off the training so quickly that you start listening to calls and you're like, "When did you start saying this? We don't do that." And or sometimes they belong in the business, they just don't belong in that job.
Yeah. Yeah.
We would take a salespeople who was just failing, move her to customer service, and she'd kill it. She'd stay there 15 years because
Wow.
that was what she was made for.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if those two didn't work, it's like, bye. You need to go find some other place to work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always a tough one, having to let people go, especially people that, you've invested in and you've seen grow and that sort of thing. I hear that story. I've had that story myself. I totally get that. One of the other stories though that we haven't really touched on is that leadership growth of your own. You and your partner get out there and you start a company, and the only way to really get your leadership chops is by doing the thing. What was your
Yeah.
leadership development like?
I had nominal mentorship along the way, and then I went, I need coaching. I need to open, and this was a boldness thing, is I had to be bold enough to ask for feedback. And I would tell them, "I want feedback. You're
Mhm.
not going to like my response to it, because I don't like feedback, but I will appreciate it after this brief period of blowback that you're going to get on it." And so that started to change. And we would do these 360s where the leaders, the VPs, and I would get feedback on our performance in like 15 categories. And some of them, people, including me, would be totally blindsided. It's like, "What? I do that?" And they go, "You don't know that's who you are, that you have." No, no. but then as soon as it's pointed out, then you start to see yourself doing it. You catch yourself doing it. You go like, oh, wow, I do
Uh,
shoot the messenger,
yeah.
you know, and you stop and you say like, and you always are the person who's responsible, but also you are the person, if your employees know that you have their back,
Hmm.
because we had a couple of rules about customers, and one of them was the squeaky wheel gets replaced, right? Not the grease. At a certain point, if somebody's got a problem, we try to solve it. But if they make a habit of just complaining all the time, let them go. It's 80-20, man. 80% of your problems coming from 20% of your customers. We were real comfortable trimming them off, and they could never be verbally abusive to our people. And no manager could be verbally abusive to any team member. There's like no yelling, no screaming, no, abusive comments or anything like that. And
Hmm.
if a client called up and started cursing out, one of my customer service people, they were gone. That was it. They got a letter saying this is your last month.
Wow.
And they would call and apologize, and we would say, apology accepted. You're still off. And when you take care of your people like that,
Hmm.
they will go to the wall for you over and over. They will defend the culture and they will protect the success of the business, to the point where it was a point where we hit a real crisis after the internet crash in 2001. I had to cut my pay in half, and I had to give everybody in at VP level a 10% cut. They all just went, yeah, of course. It wasn't like, "Hey,
That's deadly.
I need that money, for my stuff." And like, it was like, yeah, we're all in this together.
Great
And that's what
leadership right
happens
there.
they know that the customer isn't always right.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Richard Branson says this, and he says, you take care of your people and they will take care of your customers. And
Yep.
boy, that is one of the truest things I've ever figured out. When I heard him say it, I went, yep, that's pretty much the key to my success.
Awesome. Did you have a board, like an advisory board or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it was not as expansive as it could have been. But what happened is we developed just, and I did personally in particular, developed people that were straight with me.
Hmm.
They were like in two categories. They were good friends, but if they needed me to put on their business hat, it wasn't about being nice. It was about telling me what they observed. And they
Yeah.
said, I might be wrong, but this is what I think you're doing. This is where you're screwing up, I think. And I would have to digest it and say, yeah, let me look hard at that. I hadn't looked at it that way. And so that's kind of the way the whole thing went.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I was just thinking about one of my companies and putting together a board. I was talking to somebody yesterday about that. I think it's a fantastic idea. I've got one last question for you. This is
All
this is
right.
this is the big one. Okay, so the name of the podcast, of course, is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning. And winning is something that everybody can define. Everybody needs to define for themselves. The difficult part is that relentless pursuit. What would you recommend to someone in order to enable that relentless pursuit?
Most of the time, being relentless just means like another half hour of attention, of focus, of saying, it's just like if you're blessed enough to have been in athletics, particularly at a young age, with a good coach, especially, you find out over and over again you were capable of more than you thought you were because you got pushed. Somebody went,
Mhm.
no, no, 20 more push-ups, one more mile, whatever, one more exercise, one more drill. And you went like, I ain't got it. And they went, go. And you would do it and you would discover that. And that's how you become relentless, is you say, I'm going to do the hard thing when other people give up,
Yes, sir.
especially if it feels like I'm going to be one of them. And I've
Yes, sir.
decided not to be. I'm gonna go the extra step, the extra mile. It doesn't mean I have to double what I'm doing. It just means I have to go beyond what I think I'm capable of often enough to realize I got reserves.
Yeah.
And that's and then you go like, then relentless becomes a habit. It's it
Mhm.
like, I can keep doing this.
I can do this all day.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll catch up on sleep. I'll get some food eventually.
Uh-huh.
I'll recover financially. Um, but I'll get through. And if I don't, we live in America. This is where you get to start over.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a blessing in and of itself. You have a giveaway for our audience. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I anybody who wants a copy of my book, if you email me through Rick, so you got to contact him and he's going to email me, I will send you my audiobook for free. I will give you a copy of Superbold for free. And you can
Awesome,
listen
awesome,
to it.
awesome.
And it's me
Anybody
talking.
wants to, what's that?
What's that? It's
If
my
anybody wants to
voice.
get in touch with you or take advantage of any,
Yeah,
take
go.
advantage.
So Fred, the best way is fredjoyal.com. That's Joyal. Go to my website. It's the easiest way to track me down or book some time with me, do all of that stuff. If you
I might do
want
that
the video
myself.
course, it's the easiest place to get a hold of me.
And thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for being on the show. Right, I enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Rick. This was great. Have a great day, everybody.
All right. And folks, thank you so much for watching and listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll catch you next time.